Hollywood loves to claim it dreamed up every big sci-fi idea. But let's be real, Japan was already bending reality, warping imagination, and building cosmic futures long before the West caught on. Want proof? These deep-cut Japanese films planted seeds that later exploded across Hollywood blockbusters. Some look campy today, others eerily prophetic, but all of them left fingerprints on the genre. So, which one of these wild visions will surprise you most? Warning from Space, 1956, starfish aliens with glowing eyes. Sounds absurd, right? Yet, Warning from Space, directed by Koji Shima in 1956, was the very first Japanese color sci-fi film, and it didn't play safe. Instead of giant lizards smashing Tokyo, we got cosmic visitors shaped like sea stars, drifting down with an urgent message. Earth is in danger of colliding with a wandering celestial body. Here's the kicker. The aliens weren't out to conquer. They were messengers, trying to save humanity. But what happens when people laugh at the warning, dismissing the bizarre shapes and strange voices? The result is paranoia and denial, until disaster looms too close. That blueprint, aliens bringing a message instead of a threat, echoes decades later in Arrival, Contact, and even Independence Day. Japan did it first. The imagery is unforgettable. Huge glowing eyes, arms spread like sea creatures, casting shadows on city streets. To modern viewers, the costumes look campy, but in 1956 they were dazzling, surreal, and unsettling. More importantly, this was just a decade after Hiroshima, when fear of annihilation wasn't fiction. It was daily reality in Japan. That context gave the story extra punch. The apocalypse wasn't just spectacle, it was a reflection of collective anxiety. Critics sometimes mocked the odd design, but beneath the starfish suits was a serious question. Can humanity actually listen before it's too late? The film balanced spectacle with social commentary, delivering both camp and dread. Hollywood would later polish the same themes with sleek effects, but the raw concept came from here. Warning from Space wasn't just an oddity, it was a cosmic message wrapped in eccentric shapes, proving that sometimes the strangest images carry the deepest warnings. And once Hollywood tuned in, it never stopped listening. Message from Space, 1978. A cosmic adventure powered by glowing seeds. That's the wild energy of Message from Space. Directed by Kinji Fukasaku in 1978. Released just a year after Star Wars took over the world, it was Japan's boldest entry into the new wave of space opera, and it didn't hold back. The setup is mythic. A dying planet sends out 8 glowing seeds across the galaxy, searching for heroes who will rise to defend its people. The seeds find their way to a ragtag group of rebels, adventurers, and misfits who must unite against a tyrannical empire. Sound familiar? Sure, but this wasn't just a copy. It was a remix with Japanese flair. Visually, Message from Space is a carnival of spectacle. Lavish costumes, flamboyant sets, and over-the-top space battles gave it a comic book energy. Critics sneered at the time, calling it a cheap imitation, but fans flocked to it in Japan, and over the years it's been re-evaluated as a cult classic. George Lucas openly admitted how much Japanese cinema influenced his vision, from Kurosawa samurai films to sci-fi pulp. In a way, Message from Space felt like Japan taking those ideas back, blending samurai-style honor with cosmic rebellion. The film's biggest strength is its fearless embrace of excess. Where Hollywood space operas tried to stay sleek and serious, this one went for flamboyance, glowing orbs, melodramatic heroes, and outrageous battles. It was messy, colorful, and unapologetically fun. Decades later, you can see its fingerprints in modern blockbusters that mix humor, spectacle, and found family energy. Guardians of the Galaxy feels like a spiritual cousin. Message from Space may never topple Star Wars, but it proved Japan could play in the same galactic sandbox, and sometimes come up with ideas even wilder than Hollywood dared. Battle in Outer Space, 1959. Before Luke Skywalker ever hopped in an X-Wing, Japan was already staging dogfights in the cosmos. Ishiro Honda's Battle in Outer Space, released in 1959, picked up the threads of the Mysterians, but pushed the action beyond Earth's borders. For audiences at the time, it was like stepping into the future. Sleek rocket ships soaring into black skies, beams of light ripping through space, and whole cities trembling under alien attack. The story introduced a terrifying force known as the Natal, who start small, knocking out satellites and pulling tanks into the sky with gravity beams, before unleashing a full-scale invasion. Instead of lone heroes, Earth's nations joined together, sending astronauts in advanced spacecraft to confront the threat. That concept of global unity against a cosmic enemy would echo again and again in Hollywood, from Independence Day to Armageddon. But what really set this film apart was its craftsmanship. Legendary effects master Eiji Tsuburaya, often called the godfather of Japanese special effects, used miniature rockets and elaborate models to create battles that looked astonishing on screen. Watching rockets spin through starfields, firing beams at alien saucers, gave viewers a vision of space warfare unlike anything attempted before. Beyond the spectacle, the film carried a timely message, released during the Cold War, and Space Race. It imagined a world where competition gave way to collaboration because survival demanded it. That idea was radical in 1959, when tension between nations was running high. Critics often shrugged it off as just another flashy alien film, but its fingerprints are all over modern sci-fi. George Lucas himself acknowledged his admiration for Japanese cinema, and you can see the DNA here. The grand battles, the sleek ship designs, the intergalactic stakes. Battle in outer space wasn't just popcorn thrills. It was a prophecy of what science fiction cinema could become: global, spectacular, and unafraid to dream big. The Human Vapor, 1960. What happens when science gives one man the power to dissolve into mist? In Ishiro Honda's The Human Vapor, released in 1960, the answer is not triumph, it's tragedy. Forget stomping monsters or galactic wars. This was an intimate, unsettling story about obsession, loneliness, and the dangerous side of human desire. The film follows Mizuno, an ordinary man transformed by a risky experiment. The result? He can turn into vapor, drifting through walls, escaping any trap. But instead of becoming a savior, Mizuno spirals downward. He uses his powers to rob banks, all to support a dancer he adores, convinced he's building a better future for her. The heartbreaking twist: her feelings don't match his devotion, and his actions only push him further into ruin. Visually, the film was ahead of its time. Clever smoke effects, double exposures, and camera tricks made audiences in 1960 believe they were watching a man literally dissolve into thin air. The imagery was eerie and mesmerizing, giving The Human Vapor a haunting edge. What truly makes it stand out is its emotional weight. Mizuno isn't just a villain. He's desperate, misguided, and deeply human. That complexity was rare for genre films at the time, but it foreshadowed Hollywood's later fascination with sympathetic anti-heroes. You can see echoes of this film in The Invisible Man, or even in Marvel's obsession with flawed characters who straddle the line between hero and villain. Honda tapped into something universal: the fear of losing yourself to power, the pain of unreturned love, the emptiness of obsession. Beneath the smoky visuals, the story lingers because it's about more than science fiction. It's about what makes us human, and how easily that humanity can evaporate. The Human Vapor whispered where kaiju films roared, and sometimes whispers leave the deepest scars. Dora, 1964. A monster from space that eats carbon. It sounds absurd until you watch it unfold. Ishiro Honda's Dora, released in 1964, is one of the strangest, most imaginative experiments in Japanese sci-fi. Forget giant lizards stomping buildings. This creature floated gracefully through the skies, a jellyfish-like mass that consumed coal, diamonds, and anything carbon-based in its path. At first glance, it looked like pure spectacle. But dig deeper, and the metaphor becomes clear. Japan in the 60s was booming, industries devouring resources at breakneck speed. Dora became the embodiment of consumption itself, an elegant but unstoppable force, quietly devouring the world's treasures. Visually, the creature was unlike anything seen before. It hovered in eerie silence, dissolving objects with an almost hypnotic calm. No roars, no smashing claws, just inevitable hunger. And that's what made it unsettling. You can't reason with it. You can't punch it. You can only watch as it takes what it wants. Hollywood would later recycle this concept in endless forms: the blob-like creature, the unstoppable force, the shapeless threat. The blob, the mist, even elements of Ghostbusters owe something to this quiet drifter in the clouds. Adding to the strangeness was a subplot involving jewel thieves, caught in the chaos when Dora goes after their diamonds. Their greed mirrors the creature's appetite, creating a surreal collision of human folly and cosmic menace. Critics were baffled. Some dismissed it as nonsense, but others recognized its daring creativity. Over time, Dora gained cult respect. Its refusal to play by monster movie rules gave it a personality all its own. It may not have the roar of Godzilla, but it doesn't need to. Dora drifts silently, consuming everything in its way. A reminder that the scariest forces aren't angry, they're just endlessly hungry. Gorath, 1962. What if Earth itself had to move? That's the mind-bending premise of Ishiro Honda's Gorath, released in 1962. While most disaster films deal with cities crumbling or asteroids hurtling toward Earth, this one went cosmic. A rogue star called Gorath is on a direct collision course with our planet. The solution isn't evacuation. It's something far bolder, literally shifting Earth out of the way. The film follows scientists racing against time as they devise a plan to install massive rocket engines at the South Pole, powerful enough to push the Earth's orbit and dodge certain destruction. Just stop and think about that. This wasn't just about saving one nation or city. It was about humanity, moving its entire world. Visually, the film was stunning for its time. Miniature models of rocket thrusters, sprawling control rooms, and swirling starfields created a sense of scale rarely attempted in early 60s cinema. And while the effects may look dated today, the sheer ambition is undeniable. Few films dared to imagine planetary engineering on this scale. Beyond spectacle, Gorath tapped into the anxieties of the atomic age and space race. It asked what humanity might do if faced with extinction and whether cooperation on a global scale was possible. That mix of existential dread and technological hope foreshadowed decades of Hollywood disaster epics, from Armageddon to 2012. While Gorath isn't as well known as Honda's monster classics, it deserves credit for its audacity. It proved Japanese sci-fi wasn't afraid to think bigger, literally planetary in scope. Hollywood eventually borrowed the formula of cosmic threats plus engineering marvels, but Honda put it on screen first. Gorath is more than a deep cut. It's a reminder that sometimes the wildest, most impossible ideas are the ones that echo the loudest across cinema history. Gamera vs. Gyron, 1969. A monster with a blade for a head. That's right. Noriaki Yuasa's Gamera vs. Gyron, released in 1969, is one of the wildest entries in the long-running Gamera series. While Godzilla films lean toward heavy themes of nuclear destruction, Gamera always embraced its role as the friend of children. And this particular adventure took that reputation into delightfully bizarre territory. The story follows two young boys who stumble into a spaceship and accidentally launch themselves to a distant planet. Waiting for them is Gyron, a towering reptilian beast with a colossal knife-shaped head that can slice enemies in half. His attacks are brutal, yet oddly cartoonish, like something dreamed up in a fevered Saturday morning cartoon. Enter Gamera, the giant turtle protector, ready to take on Gyron in over-the-top battles that are equal parts absurd and spectacular. The fights are wild. Gyron chopping apart other monsters with surgical precision. Gamera spinning and flipping through the air like a cosmic gymnast. It's ridiculous, it's campy, and it's unforgettable. But the film isn't just about kaiju fights. Alien women scheme in the background. The children try to outsmart their captors, and the whole movie oozes with a strange, pulpy energy. It feels like parody at times, but that's part of its charm. Critics mocked it for cheap effects and outlandish storytelling, but over the years, it became a cult favorite. Hollywood would later embrace the same tone. Cosmic camp mixed with genuine stakes in films like Flash Gordon and even parts of Guardians of the Galaxy. The willingness to lean into excess, to make the audience laugh and gasp at the same time, is part of what keeps Gamera vs. Gyron alive today. This isn't polished sci-fi. This is the punk rock cousin of the genre, messy, loud, and bursting with personality. Latitude Zero, 1969. Imagine a Saturday morning cartoon turned into a full-blown pulp adventure. That's Ishiro Honda's Latitude Zero, released in 1969, a Japanese-American co-production that feels decades ahead of its time. Instead of brooding monsters or political allegories, this one went all in on swashbuckling heroics, flamboyant villains, and wild comic book energy. At its core is Captain Craig Mackenzie, the heroic leader of the submarine Alpha, a sleek, golden vessel armed with futuristic gadgets and advanced technology. His mission? To battle the evil scientist Malik, who's busy cooking up mutant creatures and hatching schemes of world domination. Along the way, we get brain-swapping experiments, mutant bats, volcanic layers, and costumed henchmen that look ripped straight from a colorful comic strip. What made Latitude Zero truly stand out was its East meets West production. It starred American actors like Joseph Cotten and Cesar Romero alongside Japanese talent, blending Hollywood flair with Japanese imagination. The result was a hybrid that looked unlike anything else on screen at the time. Visually, it was dazzling. The submarine Alpha itself felt like a prototype for the high-tech vehicles of later superhero franchises, its gadgets rivaling anything James Bond had to offer. The bright costumes and over-the-top designs added to the sense of wonder. While critics at the time dismissed it as camp, it's now seen as an early attempt at a superhero-style adventure, long before Marvel or DC conquered screens. Hollywood eventually borrowed the formula: eccentric villains, high-tech bases, flamboyant battles, and team-driven adventures. Latitude Zero might not have been a hit when it came out, but in retrospect, it reads like a prototype for the global blockbuster. It dared to be colorful when most sci-fi was dark. It embraced spectacle when others played safe. And in that way, Latitude Zero deserves its place as one of Japanese cinema's boldest, most entertaining deep cuts. Atrogon, 1963. A super submarine built to save the world. That's the thrilling core of Atrogon, Ishiro Honda's 1963 adventure that blended high-tech imagination with pulpy spectacle. At a time when James Bond was dazzling audiences with gadget-filled cars, Honda delivered something even bolder: a colossal submarine armed with futuristic weapons and flight capability, ready to battle enemies not from space, but from beneath the sea. The story introduces the undersea empire of Mu, an ancient civilization rising from the depths to reclaim the surface world. Their forces are powerful, but humanity's secret weapon is Atrogon, a sleek submarine designed by a reclusive former naval officer. With its ability to dive, soar, and unleash devastating technology, Atrogon became the centerpiece of the film, embodying both human ingenuity and militaristic pride. Visually, Atrogon was striking. The submarine itself was rendered with intricate model work, cutting through oceans and skies with futuristic elegance. Combined with elaborate sets depicting Mu's underwater kingdom, the film transported viewers to a battle of civilizations, both ancient and futuristic. What makes Atrogon so fascinating is its cultural layering. On one hand, it was pure pulp adventure, designed to thrill audiences with spectacle. On the other, it carried post-war undertones, Japan wrestling with its past military identity while looking toward a modern, technological future. Hollywood later echoed its DNA in multiple ways. The idea of a supership became central to countless films and shows, from Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, to James Bond's submarines, and even anime like Neon Genesis Evangelion. Atrogon's influence is everywhere. Whenever a high-tech vessel saves the day, you can feel its legacy. Though not as internationally famous as Godzilla, Atrogon carved its own niche, proving Japanese sci-fi could mix pulp thrills with meaningful commentary. It's a deep cut that still feels ahead of its time. Space Amoeba, 1970. When a space probe brings something back, it's rarely good news. That's the chilling setup of Space Amoeba, also known as Yog, Monster from Space, released in 1970. Directed by Ishiro Honda, this film ditched cosmic wars and city-smashing monsters in favor of something stranger: alien parasites that infect Earth's wildlife, mutating ordinary creatures into towering kaiju. The story begins with a space probe returning from orbit, carrying with it an alien life form that survives re-entry. Once on Earth, the alien presence infects local animals on a remote island, transforming a squid, a crab, and even a turtle into enormous monsters under its control. Suddenly, a tropical paradise becomes a battleground of grotesque, lumbering creatures. Visually, Space Amoeba leaned into surrealism. Watching a giant cuttlefish drag itself across beaches or a colossal crab clash with human survivors gave the film an uncanny energy. Unlike Godzilla, these monsters weren't symbols of nuclear power. They were animals hijacked by something alien creatures we knew, twisted into something unrecognizable. What makes this film so important is how it anticipated later Hollywood obsessions. The concept of an alien parasite transforming hosts is a direct ancestor to The Thing, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and countless sci-fi horror tales. Even Marvel's symbiote saga owes something to the groundwork laid here. Though critics wrote it off as another kaiju oddity, Space Amoeba has aged into a cult classic. Its island setting, eerie transformations, and strange alien logic set it apart from standard monster films. And it reminded audiences that the scariest invaders aren't always giant robots or advanced civilizations. They might be microscopic, patient, and waiting to twist the familiar into the terrifying. In its own quirky way, Space Amoeba proved that Japanese sci-fi could blur the line between camp and cosmic dread, leaving a legacy Hollywood never stopped borrowing from. The Mysterians, 1957. A mysterious dome rises from the earth. Inside are helmeted visitors who claim they only want a small piece of land and peaceful coexistence. Sounds generous, right? Not quite. Ishiro Honda's The Mysterians, released in 1957, revealed the darker truth. These aliens wanted far more than they admitted. This was no monster brawl. Instead, the invaders dazzled with ray beams, giant machines, and a chilling sense of diplomacy turned sour. Their insect-like helmets gleamed under studio lights, making them look both regal and menacing. For Japanese audiences still grappling with Cold War politics, the metaphor was obvious. Here was a tale of outsiders demanding treaties and territory, offering peace as a mask for control. That idea would resurface across decades of Hollywood films, from Star Wars' galactic councils to Independence Day's fake peace offerings. Visually, the Mysterians pushed boundaries. Miniature cities crumbled, beams tore through landscapes, and futuristic machinery filled the screen. The scale was jaw-dropping for the time, especially since it came just a few years after Honda's Godzilla. Critics brushed it off as flashy spectacle, but it laid the groundwork for how cinema could mix political allegory with sci-fi chaos. The film was also a masterclass in tension. The Mysterians claimed to be reasonable. They spoke of fairness and sharing, but beneath the polished words was the clear demand: submit or face ruin. That balance of charm and menace feels uncomfortably modern, echoing global power struggles then and now. Hollywood borrowed shamelessly. George Lucas built entire galactic politics around ideas that feel lifted straight from this film's DNA. The dome, the bargaining, the sudden reveal of overwhelming power, these became staples. In the end, the Mysterians didn't just give us glowing helmets and cool models. It asked a frightening question. What if the smiling visitor at the table is already planning your downfall? That kind of paranoia shaped decades of storytelling, making this colorful Japanese gem far more prophetic than anyone realized in 1957. Sayonara Jupiter, 1984. What happens when the biggest planet in our solar system becomes humanity's only hope? That's the daring premise of Sayonara Jupiter, directed by Koji Hashimoto in 1984. While Hollywood was busy chasing Star Wars sequels, Japan swung for the fences with a space opera that fused disaster spectacle with deep philosophical questions. The story follows Dr. Eiji Honda, a space engineer tasked with a monumental mission to harness energy near Jupiter and help humanity expand into the stars. But everything unravels when a black hole is discovered hurtling toward the solar system. The desperate solution? Use Jupiter's immense gravity to alter its path and save Earth. The concept alone was staggering, mixing hard science speculation with a cosmic-level crisis. Visually, the film was ambitious. Sweeping shots of Jupiter's swirling storms, futuristic space stations gleaming against starfields, and tense sequences of humanity trying to manipulate forces far beyond its control. Sure, the effects lacked Hollywood polish, but the scope was undeniable. It wasn't just about dazzling viewers. It was about forcing them to imagine what survival on a galactic scale would demand. What truly sets Sayonara Jupiter apart is its tone. It's equal parts disaster film and moral drama. Characters debate humanity's future, whether colonizing space is progress or arrogance, whether technology can truly save us, or whether it simply speeds us toward our downfall. These weren't just action beats. They were existential gut punches wrapped in cosmic spectacle. Hollywood never remade Sayonara Jupiter, but you can see its echoes in Armageddon, Deep Impact, and especially Interstellar. The idea of blending spectacle with weighty philosophical debate has become a staple of space epics, but Japan had already dared to ask those questions decades earlier. In the end, Sayonara Jupiter wasn't a box office juggernaut, but it deserves respect for its audacity. It proved that Japanese sci-fi wasn't afraid to go big, not just in scale, but in imagination. So there you have it, 12 Japanese sci-fi deep cuts that quietly reshaped Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. From glowing seeds to blade-headed monsters, from carbon-hungry clouds to entire planets on the line, these films didn't just entertain, They rewired the way cinema imagines the future. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts below. Share this with a friend who loves hidden gems. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the edges of film history.